A linear city is an urban planning concept of a city built along a line, which would be some kind of a main avenue or just generally a main infrastructure spine of the whole area. It has its own pros and cons compared to other designs, but it simply looks interesting. So in this video, we are going to start exploring this design in city skylines and see if it's something that can work here. Let's jump right into building the whole thing, and in the meantime, I will explain the main points of the design that I chose for this project. Maybe you have already seen some videos or read about the plan for the linear city in Saudi Arabia, so that's going to be the main inspiration for this, but obviously with some changes so it can work in the game. I'm using some gameplay mods, the usual good stuff, just to build more freely. I will link a collection in the description. And apart from the slimmer highways and some concrete patches, no custom assets. Now, the original inspiration has three basic levels. It has the surface with buildings, which is supposed to be pedestrian-only zone with lots of parks and open spaces. Then apparently there is the first underground level with AI-controlled service and resupply vehicles, and the second underground level for high-speed public transport. Also, and that is very important, the city is not planned as just like a continuous line of buildings along that central spine, but more like a separate module concept connected by the central line. That is something that's going to be very important later. In the game, I kept everything visible just so we can see the traffic, so nothing's going to be underground. I just like it that way more. And since in City Skylines you have to provide an access road to the buildings, we have to do the resupply and services differently too, on the same level as the buildings. So I decided to build two separate highway systems. One is going to be cargo only, and the other for personal vehicles only. The cargo system is made using the custom slim-looking highways from the Shuto Expressway pack from the workshop, and I made them using separate 3-lane one-way roads. The cargo system will have a single access point into one city module, and it will enter a one-way road which will work like a belt in a sushi bar, kind of. This will make the highway interchange much simpler. I don't need to provide the left turns into this one-way road, and the traffic can continuously flow, which is going to create very high capacity. Next, we have the public transport options, and that is going to be done using monorails and elevated metro trains. I chose the metro because I just like the vanilla stations more. The idea here is that the train is going to be a faster, higher capacity solution, which will have fewer stops. The monorail will have more frequent stations, so it will be slower. I haven't done that here yet in the time-lapse that you can see, but I want to have the train station in the center of one module, while the monorail will have two stations towards the sides of the module, if the module is going to be large enough. The second highway system will only be for personal cars, mostly intended to just move people in and out of the city, although I can't exactly ban them from going into different modules with this design, so that is going to be technically allowed too. It will have a separate entrance interchange into one city module. Okay, so that's the basic explanation of the central spine. Now for the insides of these modules. Each module should be self-sufficient in terms of the zoning mix, so that people living in one module can do shopping and go to work very closely to their homes. The same with all the services. They will have to be placed in all of the modules and only send vehicles inside of it. This is easily done using the enhanced district services mod later. Even garbage collection will have to be done inside the home modules only. So unfortunately, we will have to have some pollution in each of the modules, but that's kind of inevitable. The only thing that the modules will have to receive will be the goods from the outside world, and obviously citizens when they're going to be moving in. I don't want to do any industrial modules or areas like that because I don't think that's how the real-life concept is. It would only put more stress on the highway network because we would need to import the raw materials as well, or maybe create some separate raw material network, preferably outside the central line, which would go against the idea of the linear design, although that is more of a question about the outside connections maybe. I'm going to do it so the outside connections will only be on the two ends. But I guess that in real life it could be elsewhere too, probably as some entrance to some bigger factory complex outside the city or something like that. Not sure, doesn't matter right now anyway. Now, the connections inside the module. I will make them using the pedestrian roads from the Network Extensions 2 mod, and later I will ban all personal car traffic on them. This is directly tied to that original idea of a car-free surface layer. The modules will not really be that big anyway to not allow people to just walk freely all around them and of course use the public transport. I still need to allow all the service vehicles on the pedestrian roads, so it might look slightly strange how the vehicles will be just sharing the lanes with the citizens, but unfortunately City Skylines is just not meant to do these car-free zones. And it's certainly not suited to create some underground service vehicle level, which would be ideal because that's how the original idea functions. So we will have that instead. There will be only one physical road connection between the central commercial Sushi Belt road and the rest of the module. This is to allow the service vehicles to enter the Sushi Belt, otherwise I would have to put another set of all the service buildings in the commercial area, and that is just useless and I don't want to do that. But that connection will have cargo and personal cars banned. Apart from that one, only pedestrian paths will connect to the shopping area in the rough center of the module. The outline of the module is made using the wide avenue road with a single lane, one parking lane and green median. Right where this road crosses the center spine, we will do the interchange. Nothing crazy, just a simple intersection on the top with bypass highway ramps below it. It's a very low capacity solution, but most importantly it allows continuous flow down on the highway level. I don't really expect that much traffic on this highway system. That's why I chose just the national road, but we will see. And of course, the whole spine area will have the retaining walls on the sides so that the highways can be nicely sunken below the surface level. Okay, so that was the scripted part of the video, just so I'm not going to mess up any information about the design that I wanted to tell you in the beginning. But now, let's talk more freely about the actual building process and what am I doing in the time-lapse. So you could have seen me build both of the interchanges. It's nothing really all that super crazy. Even the cargo interchange, even though it looks slightly complicated, is just a very simple, compact design. Mostly intended so that cars are not really going to enter any choke points. So that's exactly the reason why I chose that one-way 3-lane road going into that Sushi Belt road, because what's most important about all of the infrastructure in the city is that it's going to be flowing. There are not going to be any traffic lights, definitely not, and just no choke points where people or cars might slow down or completely stop and slow down all the vehicles behind them, because I'm not really trying to provide that many lanes, especially on the highways, so that there's just going to be a continuous line of moving vehicles. And that's why it's super important that all the vehicles are moving and they are not stopping absolutely anywhere. And it's going to be working. At this point, I was not exactly sure if it's going to perform well, but it's a very similar concept to that infrastructure in that industrial zone. You know, if you remember that video about the efficient industrial zone, it's a very similar concept of the one-way roads with very high capacity, like in and out points of the entire area. So that's exactly the same principle. Okay, so you can see that we have some first buildings popping up in the module. It's mostly some residential and commercial buildings. At first, I was really thinking that I'm just going to use the Green Cities DLC buildings for each of the zones, but then I decided that I'm only going to use them for the residential buildings. And I really wanted to do that, especially the low density. The low density buildings, I already have some experience with them from the Aurelia project. If you remember, in the past couple of episodes, I was using them in the low density areas for just the houses. But actually even the high density structures we have seen, especially those corner kind of elliptical buildings that I have used before, and they are just looking very good. What's really good about these Green Cities buildings is that even the level 1 structures are looking really good. Usually the vanilla buildings are just very crazy with the styles. All the buildings are just looking like from different parts of the world, but the Green Cities buildings are kind of unified. They are green, of course, so that's just looking much better. And in real life concept of the linear city, it's supposed to be very eco-friendly, so it makes sense that I also do it in here using the green buildings. I wanted to even use the IT cluster for the offices, but they have slightly different functionality. They have less workers or fewer workers in the buildings, which is not ideal because I am going to be limited by space. So I really do want to provide more jobs on like smaller areas. So I want to use the vanilla, completely vanilla office buildings. And also I really want to use the high density commercial. I'm not going to use, well, I can safely say already that I did use in the last module that I built some low density commercial, but now that I'm thinking of it, why didn't I change it to the eco-friendly buildings? Maybe I am going to do that later, but right now I'm just using the high density commercial with the vanilla style. So I'm just doing some more infrastructure layout inside the module, and you can clearly tell that I am trying not really to follow any like a standard 90-degree corner patterns in here. I'm just trying to do the outline road in here, so it's a bit more random. A couple of circles with those pedestrian paths here and there just to create some interesting elements, and all kinds of different patterns here and there throughout the area. It's all going to kind of blend together because I'm obviously going to be just zoning everything with some of the high density stuff and low density on the sides. So maybe the infrastructure is not really going to stand out all that much, the pedestrian infrastructure at least, but it's just something more interesting. You know, I just didn't really want to plop the entire area using just some grids. You know, this is just much better. Also, you can definitely see it over here that I'm putting a lot of these pedestrian paths between the pedestrian roads. Now, this is because I really want to, this place doesn't really need that, but I really want to limit the possibilities for just car paths through the area. So the pathfinding is going to just determine that, yeah, it is much better to just walk throughout the places. Like I said, this is not really that critical for this place because I am going to be banning there's personal vehicles and cargo vehicles on all these inside connections, so it doesn't really matter. But it might be like a tip if you are building just a normal working city in City Skylines. Definitely try to experiment a lot with dead-end roads and just provide pedestrian connections between the dead ends. So that's going to be very, very efficient. It's going to limit the number of cars that are going to be spawning. It's kind of like a negative motivation for the citizens of the city, which might not be ideal in real life, for example. So you are basically making it very difficult to use the vehicles so that people are just going to be like, whatever, let's just walk. It's just going to be faster. So, you know, that might not be ideal in real life, but in City Skylines it works perfectly fine. People are not really protesting. Anyway, this is the first module completely done. It didn't really take that long. I really just zoned it all the way, and as you can see even here, some places are just not yet completely built. So the city is going to be constantly moving up. Now, we don't really have at this point that many the complete levels of these buildings, so we don't have the maximum population, but this first module has like 10,000 inhabitants, so, you know, not bad. It's not really that great, but it's not great, not terrible, I guess. But I can always, if I really wanted to increase the population, just get rid of the low density stuff and do the high density. But I really want to, and I need to do like a proper balance between the zoning, because I really want to have the modules kind of self-sustained, like I said in the beginning. So I really need to be careful, and I really need to keep the demand for the single module kind of levels. So I don't really need to go that crazy with the population, because then people will have no jobs, you know, no places to work in and stuff like that. So I really need to be mindful of that. Also, the modules are going to have parks, the park life parks all around them. I'm going to do them mostly in the second part of this project, but hopefully it's going to make more sense later. I just plopped like a first couple of paths on the side of this module, and later it's going to be clearer how that's going to function. Now we're going to start doing the second module, and I'm going to use a very, very simple technique here. I'm just going to use Move It to copy paste the central interchange for the cargo vehicles, because I really don't have a need to create something new in here. I can just reuse this old design because it's already done, and yeah, like I said, there is absolutely no need to create anything else because the modules are going to be very similar. So even the interchanges are going to be exactly the same, even though the layout is going to be different because I kind of don't want to just reuse the layouts everywhere the same. So I am going to do some changes between them. Now, in this module, I really want to keep it much smaller than the previous one. The previous one is probably going to be the largest module of the entire city, just because it's first. And this one also has the mountains on the side. That's kind of the problem of even the real-life concept, because inevitably they will have to solve the issue of just putting the line through mountains or all kinds of terrain changes. In this particular project in City Skylines, I just chose to have the central spine completely straight, vertically straight, which is not really realistic, but it's just going to make for much nicer shots in the cinematics, right? So that's why I did that. That's why some of these, some of the portions of the spine is cutting through the mountains, which is going very high above the river in the center of the map, and things like that, right? So that's not exactly realistic, but it's just looking much better in the game, all right? So this second module I already did much faster because I already had a better idea how it needs to be, how the sushi belt road needs to be, even though the design is slightly different, but it's very similar. It's just like a ring road, and it's going to have the commercial buildings on the sides. I am building some more interesting layout for the dead ends though, kind of radiating from the bends of the sushi road, and then just filling the gaps with a lot of these other dead end pedestrian roads so that I can zone maybe some offices there and stuff like that. And obviously the dead ends are going to be, especially towards the center of the module, connected using the pedestrian paths, the paths only for pedestrians, not these roads. And trying to escape the classic 90-degree solutions. Now, this is me just copy-pasting the interchange for the citizens. Again, same technique as before, even though in here I had slight issues because I really want to just copy-paste it so it's perfectly centered to the highway, and I had to just use some helping roads and the use of I had to just use some of the road guidelines here and there to really match the positions of especially the monorail and metro stations, but even the highways. So that's why I'm using all these helping roads here and there with different styles. I figured or found out that you have to use, for example, different roads from the network extensions pack because some have different zoning than others, so it's much better to use as like a guide road for placing the stations and stuff like that. So it's kind of technical. I think I might actually talk a bit more about it in the second video of this project. So this is a very satisfying part of each module making, obviously putting the district painting on top of it, which is actually very necessary to do the first thing after you build the module. Not really like I did it in here, but right after you finish the infrastructure, you have to do that outline or have to do the painting of the district, because it's going to automatically, with the enhanced district service mod, it's going to make all the buildings service that one district where you placed those buildings originally, right? So I didn't do that at first, so I'll have to manually just switch that with the mod, which is kind of time consuming, unnecessary. I'm not really showing it over here, but what's really time consuming and kind of annoying about the process of doing these modules is to do the restrictions, the traffic restrictions. Now, like I said, the paths, the roads, the white roads here in the modules, they have the personal vehicles completely banned, and you have to do that manually for each of the parts of the roads. So that's kind of taking a long time, and unfortunately the settings do not transfer when you copy things with Move It, or maybe they do in some new versions of Traffic Manager. I haven't really tested that. I think I am kind of using like an old version of the Traffic Manager mod, so who knows, maybe it's just my problem here. Anyway, this is something that I am going to do going further with the buildings of these modules. So what I decided to do here is I just copied module number 2, and I'm going to copy it into module number 3. I just took the entire infrastructure of that module and just copy pasted it here on the other side. I do want to do this going into future because it's just going to be much easier, and the modules are going to be similar anyway, even if I build them manually. But I am going to do some changes, so it's not like completely the same thing. So for example, with this one, with module number 2, I had to do this little cutout on the side of it because of the mountain. But in here for module number 3, that doesn't really make any sense because the terrain is, well, it wasn't, but now that I did the changes, it's completely flat. So I just did the normal corner, and then I'm going to fill it with some more infrastructure, some more of these roads. Maybe I'm going to add one more circle here. No, just a quarter circle. All right. So that's going to be it. And I'm going to prepare a couple more of like a standardized modules, I suppose, that could be just copy pasted into different areas. I'm going to build like a complete circle, then I'm going to build some more other standardized shapes, let's say, that you can easily just copy paste into different parts of the city. And I suppose that even the real life design is going to do something similar as that, right? They are going to just have some standardized layouts for certain modules because, by the way, the diagonal between the edges of the map in City Skylines map is some 25 kilometers long at max. I think I built the highways so that they are like 20 kilometers long, but the real life design is supposed to be 100 miles, so some 160 kilometers, let's say, long, so much, much longer. And I suppose that there are going to be just many more modules on the line if it's, going to be ever built, obviously, and in its full length, that is. So they're probably going to do some kind of standardized layouts for these modules anyway. It doesn't really make sense to just do like a different design for each of them, I guess. So again, this might actually be realistic, even though we are just trying it out in City Skylines, so it doesn't really matter. Now, this module, I also turned it around 180 degrees, which made it really difficult to then put the metro and monorail stations because this is not symmetrical. The metro station needs slightly more space, so it's slightly further away from the central spine. So turning it around like that is just going to create a headache because it's going to mess with the layout of the streets and of the spacing of the streets. So you're going to maximize the zoning potential. So now I'm building a second park, and yeah, by the way, this is just the most satisfying part of doing the parks and maybe even the entire project, and that is painting the outline of the park and matching it perfectly with the smallest brush to the outline of the modules. This is something that I really liked doing. I'm going to be using a single park between the modules like that, and it's just going to touch the neighboring park on the center line, basically, on the perpendicular center line. Okay, so we built 3 different modules and it seems to be working just fine. We are going to continue in another video where I would like to do some live segments. We will take a look at some of the problems that I encountered, and I will get into more details about the design I chose for the game, and we will discuss some problems that even the real life design will most probably face. But right now the city here is doing just fine. It has some 30,000 inhabitants, so nothing big. But we started making money despite all the maintenance costs of the unused infrastructure. I was obviously using the unlimited money mod at the start because I just wanted to build the infrastructure right away, which is kind of realistic. The real-life design needs a lot of initial investment to build all the necessary stuff first. It is simply not a design that can naturally grow together with the economy of the city, I guess. There were maybe a couple of problems with traffic going into the sushi belt, also some issues with the services going slowly to some parts of the modules, some little problems with demand of different zoning, but nothing all that terrible. I will talk about it in the next video from the line. Thank you guys for watching this experimental project. I hope you liked it. If you did, then please click the thumbs up button below the video, leave a comment, share, and if you're new here, feel free to subscribe and check out some other videos on the channel. Also, if you like to support the channel directly, you can become a channel member through the join button below or using the link in the video description. Big thank you to all the current channel supporters. It's really highly appreciated. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.